Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Damer, together with my co-host Mark Warren, just statewide news service and jbiztechvalley.com, and now the regular column is for the Jewish Press.
Right, I have a column called Albany Beat, and it's really showing how government relates to the Jewish community, and it's really a pleasure to have that opportunity to write for the Jewish Press. It's a paper that I grew up reading, so it's really
what we
great.
do in the Jewish View also. We have
that's right.
The government with the Jewish community.
Right. And our next guest is someone who's returning as a repeat guest, John McDonald, the Assemblyman from Cohoes. So welcome to the Jewish View.
Mark,
welcome
Rabbi.
back.
Good to see you.
Excellent.
I wanted to...
our next door neighbor, really.
That's
the
right.
Assembly district. We have obviously the Assembly all over New York State, but you're our next door neighbor.
Well, he's also one of my favorites.
There you
and
go.
I don't have many favorites.
Oy vey.
So he's one of my favorites.
There you go.
I wanted to also ask you about this education investment tax credit.
Yeah.
Because it's coming up towards the end of session. It's going to be resolved. It's now being negotiated back and forth by staff and all that. What's your take on it? What's your view on it?
You know, I've been a supporter of the education tax credit since I've been in the Assembly. It does come, obviously, with a little bit of trepidation, particularly those in the public education field, and I get it and I understand it. On the other hand, I'm a little bit unique in a way. When you look at my district, the district I represent, probably 15 to 20% of the children that I represent throughout the 108th Assembly District are in charter schools.
Really, that many?
That many. Isn't it amazing? And
Yeah,
then there's
I didn't know
obviously
that much.
a strong preponderance of Catholic schools.
No yeshivas.
No yeshivas. However, my colleagues in the Assembly, many in downstate in New York City, are very adamant about this. And this, I think, what's made it a very logical consolidation of parties to be supportive of it. In the public education community, they feel it's basically caving into the hedge fund investors. I get a little bit concerned about that because I think it gets a little bit blown out of proportion.
Because they have a big tax
Right,
write-off, these people?
Right, but and I think that's why there needs to be some very thoughtful discussion about maybe having some thresholds to make sure that, you're right, this is about supporting education opportunity and education choice. And that's where my position is on that. We don't want to see any program abused, any public. We just, in the budget, just cleaned up the brownfield cleanup program, which was, once again, well-intentioned, implemented several years ago, but guess what? Large investors literally almost bankrupted the system and took advantage of it. We want to make sure that an education tax credit, which has been something that I've been hearing about for over 20 years, if not longer, that it's done properly and appropriately. It was very cunning, I guess is the word I would say, the way the governor pitted the battle this year.
Between the DREAM Act.
The DREAM Act and the education tax
And now
credit.
I understand it's rent regulation in New York City against the EITC.
Yeah, it's interesting because the other component that's out there when you talk about rent regulation is there's talk about a permanent extension of the property tax cap. And I'm still a former mayor, so and once you're a mayor, you're always a mayor. So I'm sensitive to what obviously people pay in property taxes, but I'm also sensitive in regards to what's happening with the property tax cap and how it is going to start to lead to more bankrupting of local governments. We need to be mindful of that. That doesn't mean we raise taxes, but it does mean that maybe we look at that whole formula of property tax cap and see if there's areas where we can make some modifications to at least address situations like catastrophic events, which can drive costs to the roof and cause local governments to break the cap.
So let me move on.
So I know, just getting back to the tax credit, I'm supportive. It is interesting, you're right, in Albany it's all about relationships, it's all about who's on board, or it's also about who you can put against it and see how you can get some kind of a compromise, which some people don't like to hear that, you should never compromise. Well, life is about compromise. It's about listening to individuals and meeting them.
And just since the Senate passed it, what's holding up the Assembly? We've had many people, Mark and like we said, we have many assemblymen come through.
Yeah, there's just not that magic number yet. But I think that
76?
number... Yeah, 76 is a good number. Yeah. And that magic number is close, but I think it's been, particularly the aftermath of the budget, it was a very interesting time with education. all-time record increase in education funding, and you couldn't find more people unhappier. The education community is upset. They're confused, and understandably so. So I think there's a little bit of a lull right now, but I think you're absolutely right. This will be probably around the 16th or 17th of June is when you're going to start to see
You think
something.
you're going to be optimistic about that it will be
I think
up for a vote?
I think it's on the table. I think it's on the
Okay.
table. How and when it gets to that point, I'm not sure, but I think it's on the table. There's a lot of downstate members
Yeah.
who are under a lot of pressure, and you have to talk politics. I mean, the reality is in downstate area, most of the elections are on primary day, and primaries are very difficult, and those members don't like primaries. It's politics. Sorry,
right.
it's the truth though.
Well, you never liked the primary.
Nobody likes a primary, but you know what? The other hand, if that's the route you have to go, that's the route you have to go. That's how I got here, right?
Well,
There must be a winner. You're
That's
here. So you're the winner.
I got a repeat invite back. That's a good sign.
That's right. I wanted to ask you about, well, I want to run down the committees that you're on.
Yeah.
You're the chair of the subcommittee on effective treatment,
Yep.
which I have no idea what that
Yeah,
says.
it's
Treatment
actually,
for
it
what?
basically, it sits under
Drug-
the Committee of Alcoholism and Drug Abuse.
Right,
and-
which you're a member of.
Right, which I'm a member of. And our charge and responsibility is to really reevaluate and meet with the communities that are in the treatment community to try to keep moving towards, obviously, the most effective
Okay.
treatment. Finding out where the shortages are, whether it's housing, whether it's funding, whether it's follow-up programs. I believe part of the biggest problem with drug and alcohol abuse, particularly with heroin and opiate abuse, has been the fact that we don't look at that in the same way we look at diabetes or we look at blood pressure. You know, they're very difficult to measure, but we don't follow up with patients as much. We wait till they relapse. We really need to look at drug addiction. We need to look at mental health as a disease. It's not a condition, it's a disease. And it's a disease that needs to be treated just like we treat hypertension, congestive heart failure, COPD. I can go on
Well,
and
it's
on.
interesting because you're on the mental health committee
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
And so are you sort of gearing your current committee assignments to eventually, when you get a little more senior, that you want to be on the health committee, which is a very
No, I
high
mean,
level?
health.
Because
I
you're a
don't- Yeah,
the
well,
audience should know you're a pharmacist.
Right,
so-
right. You know, it's interesting. I guess if the opportunity presents itself, I probably wouldn't say no, but I don't know if I'm really looking to be, definitely, I mean, we have a great chair with Richard Gottfried. I don't know. That's a long way down the road. I think the nice part about being a healthcare professional, today was a good example. I had 3 different members come up to me, ask me about certain bills. The insurance committee I'm on, as you know, and the chair had asked me about some items, and that people want to direct things because that's my field, and I think that's the beauty of what the leadership and the speaker try to do in the assembly is you try to match people in their areas of comfort, their areas of expertise, and from my perspective, when it comes to business, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to local governments, those are the areas I should be in. That's the areas I should be comfortable with. So that's where I've tried to position myself with not the long-range goal of being on health,
Okay.
but to at least be available to actually add expertise. One of the things that I've always and will deliberate is I never want to be in a position where I'm also conflicted.
Uh-huh.
You know, you try to minimize that. I mean, there's always going to be conflicts of interest.
And you think the health committee would be too close where?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it. So that's where
okay.
I've got to be deliberative about that and think about it. But of course, as you know, whenever there's a conflict of interest, the most important thing you need to do is 1, recognize that you have one, and 2, deal with it.
Yeah.
The problem happens when people don't.
So tell me about the outside income part of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that impact what your legislative life and
Yeah.
then what you have to disclose, what you have
Right.
to claim?
Right.
I mean, because there's,
You know-
again, we're sitting on the heels of
Yeah,
another
yeah,
assemblyman
yeah.
who's resigning from office.
Yep,
and-
yep. So I don't, you know, it's interesting. Last week we received our ethics package. You know, we have to file a disclosure by May 15th, which I'll probably do over this weekend. And there's 2 additional questions to really explain more greatly where your outside income comes and what you do. So mine will be relatively simple. It's the same one I've been putting on for years. I own and operate Maris Pharmacy. I'm a practicing pharmacist. The interesting part is, you know, because the pharmacy is a free will pharmacy, anybody can come in,
Right.
Anybody can leave.
Right.
They don't have to come there.
Right.
There's really no conflict. I don't have that type of conflict where I'm making referrals. And that, unfortunately, the legal community, probably unfairly, has been really the one that's been targeted during this whole outside income aspect, because that community has always operated under a referral system. And, the most important thing is that you make sure that I don't have a conflict. When I first started, I don't know if I talked about this when we last met, my first month into office, at the first ethics training we had, within 15 minutes, I said, I think I have a potential conflict of interest. And therefore, I approached council and the Legislative Ethics Commission. I laid out, basically, we were servicing state-run group homes that, unfortunately, they don't bid their services, or they didn't bid their services at the time. I actually inherited them from another pharmacy that went out of business. And, we were doing a great service. People loved it. We had a great relationship, but guess what? Because it's over $25 a year in business with the state, either had to be bid or I needed to give up the business. They wouldn't bid it, so I had to give up the business, about $500,000 a year in business.
And how much of business did this generate for you?
About $500,000.
$500,000.
Yeah. It was unfortunate in many aspects, but on the other hand, I'm confident. I know I did the right thing. I wrote a letter to the Legislative Ethics Commission. I said, I think I have a conflict. My plan is to, over the next 3 months, move this business to another provider. And I didn't move it right away and stop, because as a professional, as a healthcare professional, you can't abandon your patients.
Right.
So we did it over a period of time. They sent a response back very clearly. I keep it with me all the time in case the media asks me about it, saying that you addressed it properly. There was no conflict of interest.
So it's amazing that the media hasn't focused on
Actually, I've done interviews on this. The media's talked about how we have a legislator who did the right thing.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that. I
Yeah.
missed those
Yeah.
stories. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
I'm all over the map here. What's your position with
From
mixed-
healing someone
I
to
know,
hitting
I
someone
know.
in the head over here.
What's your...
I'm not going to lose sleep over this one either way. It's not like I came to the legislature to address mixed martial arts.
Right.
That being said, I'm leaning more towards being supportive.
Okay.
If you take apart the different components of mixed martial arts, whether it's kickboxing, whether it's boxing, wrestling, those are all regulated on their own within today's environment. The other aspect that's of interest is that we have an amateur population that is growing in these dark basements, and the bottom line is it is happening one way or the other. So this is one of the times when I guess I will take the position that it's probably best that the state step in and regulate it. This is not about generating more money for the Times Union Center, although the Times Union Center will probably benefit from it. On the other hand, I think by regulating it and regulating with an emphasis on trying to decrease the violence. I mean, some of the typical prototypical pictures that those against the issue distribute are very graphic and unacceptable. It's not what I would like to see. So we did discuss it in conference the other night. That's pretty well documented out there. I can't really tell you where we're at with it because I couldn't really get a firm sense if it's a going or not going. I can tell you that there was very passionate discussion. Almost all the members were involved in the discussion. And I think that that's something that is not really formalized where it's going to go this year.
What was Carl Hasty's take, the speaker? What was his take on this? Because he used to sponsor, he was one of the co-sponsors, then he took his name off all the bills.
The speaker, to his credit,
He just sat there and listened?
he listened.
That's it?
He listened. That's it. He introduced Joe Morelli, who's the sponsor of the bill, said Joe's going to explain the bill. And the speaker, to his credit, for the 3 hours sat there and listened. And I think that's important. You know, it's important because he needs to be totally in tune with where the members are.
Okay. So you're leaning in favor?
I'm supportive of it.
You're supportive?
At this, yeah. I realize that.
Do you think you might put your name down as co-sponsor?
I am a co-sponsor of the bill.
Oh, well, there you go. You can't be against it.
Yeah,
You're
no,
co-sponsor.
against, right.
Okay. You have the bill that's in the legislature that says it relates to community-based initiatives for the purpose of trapping, neutering, vaccinating, and returning
Yeah.
feral cats to the area from which they
Yeah.
were trapped.
Yeah.
Well, how'd that come
How'd that
about?
get there, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting what you experienced when you were mayor, right? I think my second year as mayor, we had a feral cat issue on a certain part of the city, and it was a disaster. It was just tough. And the approach from the community was, well, we will go out there and kill the cats and shoot them. And I'm like, you know, that's not a good message to send to our youth, that we have a problem, we just want to shoot the problem and move on. And that's the way I
Did that
felt.
with the bison.
Right. So, well, the bison became a public safety
I
issue.
know.
But that being
Okay.
said, you're right, though. So, interesting enough, you know, whenever there's an animal issue,
Yes.
you'll get messages from all over the world. And people from California
Yes.
and North Dakota where this is a major issue. And we as a city, because of our laws, could not really directly get involved. But there were many of good nonprofits
Yes.
that are out there. This is what they do. They're animal, obviously,
Like
they're advocates.
Mohawk Hudson Humane Society.
Exactly,
yeah.
right. So basically what this bill does is allows Mohawk Hudson to actually fund nonprofits that they work with who will do trap, neuter, and release. In other words, take these cats from the wild, neuter them so they can't reproduce, return them back into the community, whether it's the community they came from or another community. And at the same token, why do I really think this is interesting? Because guess what? Guess who pays the bills for Mohawk Hudson Humane Society? Local governments.
Really? Oh,
And they based
really?
it. They pay a pro rata share. So if we can decrease the number of cats being left off at the Humane Society, and trust me, there's a lot being left off, and if we can reduce their overhead costs, then we have a chance to actually have an opportunity to reduce the costs back to local governments.
Okay.
Now, don't get me wrong, your taxes won't drop by 20%. But it gets back to also trying to find a humane way to approach the issue.
That's the issue. You have a bill that says exempt certain senior citizen organizations from paying sales and compensating use tax.
You know, it's interesting. Most senior citizen centers are 501c3 nonprofits, so they're exempt. But there are a few, and this actually started with my partner in the Senate, Senator Marchione. There are a few organizations that are not fully incorporated 501c3s, but still act in that capacity. They're not able to go through with the 501c3 status, which can be arduous at times for some. So we're trying to find a way to exempt it. That's going to be a challenge, to be honest with you.
Okay, so that's one of the, now I have your favorite bill here.
Oh boy.
It relates to the display of tobacco products
Yeah.
in pharmacies.
Yeah.
All right.
This is my compromise bill.
Yeah.
We talk about compromise, right, on a regular
Okay.
basis. You know, I'm a pharmacist. You know that we haven't sold tobacco products in our pharmacy for over 30 years.
And I know you don't smoke.
And I don't smoke.
Right.
But that's not, again, just for the people like major, like Walgreens, CVS, they do sell.
They do sell tobacco products, and there are some independent pharmacies throughout New York State that sell them, and they are the only place in town, and their customers rely on that.
But didn't CVS do something?
CVS just made the move back in October to move tobacco products out of their pharmacy, which is
And
a
to
good
put a
thing.
black,
They don't even sell 'em.
They don't even sell them.
Right.
But there are some that put a black wall up.
Right, and so, you know, when the anti-tobacco advocates came forward and said, would you support banning it? I said, you know, I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate their passion. However, I have a concern about basically saying a legal product can't be sold. And the reality is that, you know, we still live in a free enterprise. We still have
Good for you.
capitalism as part of our thinking. So my feeling was, let's really peel back the onion and see what the issue is. And, you know, what the advocates were very instrumental in educating me on was the fact that when you look at the packaging of tobacco products and look at the package of the candy rack that's usually in front of the tobacco products, right? A lot of correlation, a lot of similarities. And therefore, I said, you know what? Let's do what Neil Gold has always been a very good person for me to talk to about this, because when I was mayor of Cohoes, I actually went on a little bit of a tirade about how they were on some of the groceries and Price Choppers and Cohoes were displaying their tobacco advertising on the windows, and it was getting a little bit over the top, and there are regulations. So I remember sending out a letter as mayor to the groceries in the city, and Neil called me right away. He says, listen, I am fully compliant, and he was very polite about it, as you know he would be. But he said, one of the things that's very important to me is that we don't even display tobacco products. So I went over and looked, and sure enough, in Price Chopper, in Hannaford, in ShopRite, they almost hide their tobacco products. They're there if their customer wants them,
Right.
but they don't actively promote them, and they don't actively push them. And I've talked to the chain pharmacies, because I represent many interests, but pharmacy interests are definitely one I'm not going to avoid. And slowly but surely, some of the chains are starting to adopt that. So my feeling was, let's put this bill on the floor. Let's see where it's going. Last year, it didn't get out of committee. It actually struggled because there was a divide. There was a divide on my house side that they wanted all display of tobacco, no matter what the retail establishment, removed. I don't agree with that.
Right.
I think you're going to be really doing a deleterious effect to small convenience shops and businesses. So and then the other side just said, no, absolutely, don't touch it. So actually, it's sitting in Member Gottfried's committee. I've got to talk to him and see where we're going to go with that, and maybe you'll have the opportunity at some point down the road too. But I've got to move on that because right now in Albany County, after the county executive, we talked about the history. I sent him this state bill, and they're putting their best foot forward on the county level, which I give them credit for, but we really need to get it done at the state level.
Okay, well, there was a certain, I wanted to, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about this Georgia delegation, not the state of Georgia,
Right.
but the
Yeah.
country of Georgia in the Caucasus region of Eurasia. They visited the state capital. How
Yeah.
did you get involved in
It's
this?
interesting. When I was mayor of the city of Cohoes, I ended up having a friend who was always involved with the Department of State visitors, either through the state or through the federal government. And then, interesting enough, when Jack McEnany was retiring, and I did inherit part of it. Pat replaced Jack McEnany. There's no
Yes,
doubt about
but
it.
you have some-
But I have, I lost all of East Greenbush. 15,000 people moved into the city of Albany.
Right.
So I have a third of the city of Albany. So some of the people that Jack used to visit knew that I was doing this, and they said, geez, would you mind stepping up and being the international greeter? So I get, on average, probably,
really?
I get 2 or 3 a month on most part. Well, it goes in waves, but
When the Taiwanese came, were you the official greeter
I
for
don't
the
think the Taiwanese were in, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
That one I did not, no. Sometimes they will come with members, because obviously there's Taiwanese communities in New York City
So
particularly.
there's no big Georgian community.
Not that I'm aware of,
Not that I'm
but
aware of either.
usually it's government officials, and they're out there looking at certain things. I'm trying to remember what they were here on. I think they were here on open and transparent government, which is
Okay.
interesting, because as much as I think sometimes we struggle here at the state at times, they're struggling much worse than other countries, let's put it that way.
Well, you've always been a proponent of transparent government
Yeah.
and open process for
Yeah.
conducting city business. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
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 So that fits.
They may not like what they see, but they're going to see it nonetheless, right?
So what did you? What was your take about with the Georgians? Did you?
I'm drawing a blank on what their visit was. You'd think I'd remember every visit as the only visit I had, but
Well, it says
when-
the visit was to focus on the various roles in internal communication and planning of federal, state, and local government public offices. Additionally, visitors took the opportunity to discuss assembly floor debates and the passion behind those debates as members of the assembly advocate on behalf of the citizens
Yeah.
of New York.
Well-
so it's a very general
Yeah, what
explanation.
the things that I recall talking about with them was, obviously we talked about the legislative process, the aging of bills, the new technology that is now finally
Yes.
live, although it's not completely gone, but it's there. We talked also about our open form of government. I mean, most people don't realize it, but you can, if your heart desires, and you've probably done this more than enough times, watch every little debate going on. The Assembly is very open in regards to that aspects. We are, under the leadership of Speaker Hastie, going to be taking our web LRS system and making it more accessible to the public so they can see, as bills jump in and out of committee, how quickly they're going and stuff like that, which is it's important. It's part of the process. We also talked about communication. I think that's always interesting, and everybody does communication differently. A lot of people like to hire their press folks and this and that, and I was never much into that. I kind of learned a long time ago when I first became mayor. Let your body of work speak for yourself. Eventually, people will find you for the right reason. But when you try to put yourself out there all the time on being an authority on everything, you're going to realize, number one, you're not. And number two is the media will figure it out, and it may not go too well.
Right.
So stick to
So
what
you
you
gotta
know.
be a bit humble. Also,
Bingo. Yeah. Trust me. Humble goes a long way in our industry, I
Yes,
think.
it does. I
Well,
want
it goes for everybody, really.
That's
huh?
right.
Absolutely.
All right.
There's another bill which makes perfect sense, but it requires safer window coverings in child daycare centers, public institutions for children, and certain other facilities.
Yeah. Well, foster
Oh,
homes. Foster homes. Anything under,
Foster homes,
under
okay.
OCFS control. That goes back to this terrible tragedies that are happening at a clip of about a couple hundred a year, where children are suffocating on window blinds.
Oh, is
the
that
courts,
what it is?
yeah,
Oh,
and-
okay. I thought it was for people looking in and peering in.
No, because the interesting part is some people have taken the approach, I'll take down the blinds, then they got people looking in. It deals with child suffocation. As you know,
Really?
there's a
Like few
family.
hundred?
I'm glad I asked.
We had a family here in the capital region that lost a grandson in another state.
Yeah.
And that kind of inspired me to get involved with that and some other bills. I have another bill that's moving through the Health Committee next week that's going to require the Department of Health to come up with a brochure to give to parents, but not when they're leaving the hospital and they're carrying home the new baby, but within the first 6 months of their child wellness visits, to really have pediatricians take a few moments and say, Mom, Dad, take a look at what your blinds are, because it's challenging, very challenging.
Okay, so it's to prevent the little kids
Prevent
from getting
these
tangled up
these
in
accidental
the cord.
suffocations, yeah. I mean, the advocates truly would love to see totally every window blind cordless, and so would I. But the reality is that to put a mandate like that out on not only child care centers, but anybody out there, the window blind manufacturers would be ecstatic because they'd be selling all new blinds. But I'm a firm believer that, we do still have an education opportunity here. Let's educate the public. Let's see what we can do to help, be more conscious, because being more conscious and aware is the best precaution we can do.
All right, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up in the last few minutes that we have that?
No, I love these interviews because I don't need to really think about it. I just need to answer the questions.
But, so with all right, let me ask you about the Assemblyman William Scarborough.
Yeah.
He put in, the reason I'm asking is because you don't have this
I don't have to
issue.
worry about per diems. Yeah, I know, it's great. It's
But
great.
he put in for per diem money, which is like $100 or $200 when he wasn't here.
Right.
And the state paid him over a period of time for time that he wasn't here. He shouldn't have been paid for that.
It's unacceptable. He should be out of office. And it's, Bill's a decent guy. I have, my interactions with him have been limited. He's always been a gentleman, but, as you saw in his public apology,
But
he
he-
admitted he got into bad straits and he abused the system.
But when he
And-
was charged, he said, the federal prosecutors don't understand how we do business here and what our...
Yeah, I don't know if he was being forthright at that time, but I think
you know?
it's come around to be fully documented exactly what's happened. And,
You just shake your head when these things happen. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really because of the pay, because he hasn't had a pay raise, or there's been one pay raise in 23 years. I mean...
Yeah, it's to be honest with you, the excuses. His best excuse was that he did wrong. That was his best excuse. The other excuses are not going to sit well, and this is why it is challenging. Why the public gets cynical, whether it's at state government or in government in general, and it paints a very broad brush. It affects everybody, and that's unfortunate because it's government is complicated. It's complicated because the laws can be interpreted 20 different ways. But when you have elected officials who are entrusted with those responsibilities of making the laws, and they do these type of things, it's unacceptable. And, he'll move on. I wish him well in whatever his endeavors are, but...
Well, it'll be jail, for one thing.
Well, it is what it is, but
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. But it's also something that, quite frankly, as a citizen, we don't need those type of individuals.
When
in our
Jillian's
office.
was open and they used to have the legislators come down and sing for charity, he would always come in like second. He has a good voice.
He's
Maybe
very
he'll-
talented.
So maybe he'll sing in the prison.
Well, there's always,
anyway.
there's always a career after politics.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you, Assemblyman. It's good to have you back again and
Always
doing the
appreciate-
good work of not only New York State, but also the Capital District, and having our interest in, in mind, and helping us out, and continue your good work with success.
We appreciate
Much
the opportunity.
success.
Thank you.